Welcome everybody to the World Jewish Congress webinar series. It is a great honor to have today our guest Ofer Erez, who's coming especially from Israel to New York. So we are in New York in the headquarters of the World Jewish Congress. The webinar series, for those that are familiar with, is a unique program that gives perspective on Israel and Jewish issues all over the world to know better the Israeli society and to understand the Jewish values. So thank you for coming today. I will introduce you in a few minutes properly. Before we introduce Ofer, just for you to know that any question that you have in mind, anything that you want to ask Ofer, you just can ask him directly on the comments on Facebook. You ask a question, then we're going to ask Ofer directly, and he will answer everything that you want to know about him. So don't hesitate to ask complicated question and easy question as well. So before we go deep in the subject, I think that I would like to take a moment to send our condolences to the two Israelis that have been killed yesterday during a terrorist attack in the Alon group, in the Barkand industry area in Israel, close to Ariel. It was a terrible attack. Two Israelis have been killed, and we hope that terror will end in Israel, but we just want to send our condolences to the family. So thank you everybody for being with us today. Thank you, Ofer, and I will now be able to introduce you properly. So Ofer is a unique person. He's the first openly transgender serving in the IDF. He's also, during his service, lead the change in the policy how to accept and to work with the transgender soldier into the IDF. And by the change that was created in the IDF, he also helped to change different policies in the US Army, the Canadian Army. So today we're going to hear about your experience, your story, and thank you for being with us today.
Of course.
So the first question will be simple but complicated at the same time. Can you tell us more about your journey and your story?
I will start from the beginning. I was born in a small kibbutz. Kibbutz is a small community in Israel. Usually kibbutzes are located in far away from the center of Israel, the center of population. So it's a small place with maybe 300 people living together. So I was born there, the first daughter of my parents, the first granddaughter of my grandparents. Actually, it's not even my memory. It's something my parents told me, that in the age of 2, I guess, I came to them and asked them to shave my head. Again, the first...
At the age of 2?
The age of 2.
That's young, yeah.
Again, their first daughter, they looked at me and said, okay. And they let me cut my hair. And in the age of 5, I think, maybe 4 even, I came to them again, this time demanding to stop wearing skirts and dresses and stuff like that. And again, they looked at me and said, okay, and also let me wear whatever I liked. And from this moment, I practically looked like every other boy in my class. But again, it was a very small place. Everybody knew everybody, so everybody knew who I was. Everybody treated me the way, you know, I was born, as the first daughter of my parents. But in the same time, I guess already I knew something is different. I didn't have any words to describe it. Again, it was the beginning of the 90s, far away from everywhere. TV was not a thing. Back in the kibbutz, at least. I didn't have any words to describe it. I do remember one day, again, the age of 5, it was Friday night. Everybody in the kibbutz go together to eat dinner, the Friday dinner together. So I went with my family, and everybody's like dressed nicely because it's Shabbat.
It's Friday, Shabbat.
Exactly. Everybody's dressed nicely, and I dressed nicely as a boy. And we walked over to the big dining room in the kibbutz, and I tried to explain to myself, what is this feeling? Why do I feel more comfortable in those...
What age you were?
White button shirt.
No, what age?
Age 5.
5.
5 years old. Why do I feel more comfortable with this white button shirt than the dress? And it was a secular place, again, a kibbutz, and yet the only kind of explanation as a 5-year-old I could think of was that God put me in the wrong body. This is the only thing I could say to myself to explain it. I grew up with this feeling, but not knowing how to express it. Nobody around me was I could use as an example. And so I grew up knowing that I have this internal reality, let's call it, and the external one, and those two can never meet. Around the age of 12, I guess, you start puberty, and if before then I could just cut my hair short and wear boys' clothing and everything will be fine, now I needed to put some more effort into it. And I found myself, in Israel, it's very hot in the summer. So, and yet I found myself wearing like 3 layers of clothing, where the last one is like a big sweatshirt of my dad or my granddad, just to hide my body. And again, with no way to explain others what do I feel or why do I do those things. I guess around the age of 13, 14, I already realized how do I want to live my life, but also that it's not possible. It's not something I never saw someone do something like that. It's not something I thought is possible in any way. So actually my solution, the only one I could think of, was to disappear, to just run away to some country where nobody knows me and start a new life as a man, because I didn't thought in Israel something like that can happen. But when I was 16, already pretty much desperate, like not knowing how can I do something about that, I met Eli. Eli was 1 year older than me, very cool guy. That I could see myself in him. And when we first met, he told me about himself a bit, and he said he is trans. And I asked him, what it means? And he explained to me, it's very simple. I was born a female, but I'm a man. This is how I feel. This is how I see myself. This is how I want to live my life, and this is how I live them. And I looked at him and said, "You can do that?" And he laughed and said, "Yes." And actually, it was the first time someone ever identified as trans. I saw someone identifying as trans.
In the kibbutz, you don't have so many people to identify yourself.
Exactly. And more than that, he was someone I could relate to. He was 1 year older than me, again, very cool. I could see him do what I wanted to do my whole life and didn't thought it's possible. Yeah. And so actually it was the missing piece of the puzzle for me, because as you see me right now, just without a beard, unfortunately the same height, this is how I looked like since ever. So with his words, I was able to come out to my parents, to my friends, and actually start my life as just any other teenage boy in Israel.
Also at the age of 16, you received the first letter from the army.
Yes.
And then you know that you need to join the Israeli service, and how you react and what you do at this moment, because I think it's a big question to yourself, or how you present yourself. So what you did at this time?
So in Israel we have mandatory draft. It's not a question whether or not to go to the IDF, but I grew up in a very Zionist home, not a militant one, but the one where we believe in being taught that being a part of taking responsibility about the place you live in, it's a big honor. I really looked forward to serving in the army and to be a part of the Israeli society. And yet in the same time, I started realizing it's not going to be as easy as I thought. Yeah. Actually, my parents met in officer course, so I didn't have
nice.
I didn't thought about the problems, and I thought they would encourage me to go to the IDF, but they, instead of encourage me, started asking me those complicated questions about how are you going to handle serving in the military as a trans. And in the beginning, I didn't want to think about that, but after a few months I realized it's not something that can be ignored. Yeah. And actually I realized that being trans in the IDF, again, it was back in 2011. nobody knew anything about that. I tried to ask, to read, but it was nothing out there. And I realized the only way I could serve and do a meaningful and successful service is to go back to the closet, is to hide my identity, because I was terrified. I was terrified about how would it be to be trans in the military, and I decided my service is more important to me. And so...
But you were not afraid when you joined the IDF back in the closet, that you meet people that know that you are out of the closet, and they will identify you, and then they will speak about it. We're not afraid about that. Israel is a small society. Everyone knows each other.
Israel is a small society, but when you go to the IDF, you go to a new world. You meet new people from all over the country. Usually you don't meet people actually from back home. Yeah. You meet people from different places in the country, from different places in the society, different culture, different religions. So it's everyone is out there serving together. And actually, this was the reason I was so afraid. I didn't know how people from other places
would react to you.
Exactly. But I also decided that I'm not going to hide it from my commanders. I believe that if I ever need any sort of help, I shouldn't expect it, but if I want to be able to ask for something, they should know about that.
Yeah.
So I hide the fact that I am trans from my peers, from the people I served with, but my commanders knew, and I told them...
From the first day?
From the first day, yeah. During my recruitment process, I said it over and over again, like everywhere I went, I put it on the table. It wasn't a secret. I said it to the army officials that surprisingly were okay about that, but clueless. They didn't know what does it mean, and I explained to them that for me it doesn't need to mean anything beside one thing. In the IDF we have men's uniform and female's uniform.
And you want a men's uniform?
I wanted the men's uniform. And again, it's a very small, like slight differences. But for me,
it means a lot.
It means a lot. It's like walking with a sticker over your forehead saying, "I'm a woman." If I wear this female uniform.
The female uniform, you're a woman. And male uniform, you're a man.
Exactly.
Based on the IDF, okay. And what happened when you received in your cell, when you received the men's uniform, then you begin your process in the army?
So I tried to get the men's uniform, and the reaction was, "We are very sympathetic to your situation, but we just can't. We don't have any way, because you are listed as a female, we don't have any way to give you the men's uniform."
There was no policy, basically.
No policy, none whatsoever. But so I tried, and a week before my enlisting day arrived, I was desperate enough to go to... I didn't get any positive answers, so I did the last thing anyone can do, and I asked the help of a military psychologist. I thought maybe he can, explain to others why do I need a men's uniform, and I was very disappointed to realize that they also didn't know anything about that, and they actually thought I'm going to have problem to adjust to the military system because of my gender identity. This was one of the hardest moments I had during the process, because it was actually, I think, the first time I got a negative reaction to my identity. But after
it's not because of the people, it's because of the policy that it was not adopted, right?
It was because it wasn't any policy. They didn't know anything about that. It wasn't because, I want to believe, it wasn't because of prejudice or something like that, just because, they lack the knowledge to help. So I arrived to what we call the Bakum, where you
Can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
For those that just joined us today in live, so we are in live from New York, don't hesitate to ask questions in the bottom, in the comment section, and Ofer will obviously answer each one of your questions, so don't hesitate to write everything that you want to know. Ofer is here for you. Thank you. So you can continue.
Of course. So I arrived to what we call the Bakum. This is where you get your uniform, and this is the place where you start your military service. And I did one last effort to get the men's uniform, and again, I got a negative response. And the officer sat in front of me and told me I have two options. One is to take the female uniform, start my service properly, and start my training. And the other option is to refuse to refuse taking the female uniform, refuse getting on the bus, and practically refusing an order.
Yeah.
Refusing an order in the idea in any military.
That's a bad way of beginning the service.
Exactly. So standing in front of those two options, I decided that, as I said earlier, I choose a meaningful service instead of my gender identity, which I'm now I feel very odd saying that, but back then this was the only thing that makes sense to me. So I went over there, I took the female uniform. It was one of, again, I felt so ashamed, you know, it's like wearing a dress in your first day in the army.
Yeah.
And I started my service properly.
In what unit?
I joined the IDF behavioral analysis unit. Actually, it is one of the only professions in the IDF being. It's a course only for women. So I joined a course only for women, which is also very funny. So I arrived to the base. It was the middle of the night. Everybody is like tired and with the big bags and everything, and people are yelling at you because this is your first day of training. But also in the IDF, there is a policy of every new soldier that arrives to the unit must have a personal interview, a personal introduction to his commander in the first 24 hours, because we believe that a commander should know his soldiers. So I sat in front of my commander. She was maybe 19 years old, only maybe 1 year older than me. And as I said earlier, I believe that my commander should know that
Who you are.
Exactly. And I told her what I just told you. And again, 19 years old, you can imagine she maybe never heard the word trans, and of course never met someone who actually identified as trans, but you can imagine all the questions she had in her mind, but she only asked me one thing. She said, okay, so what do you need? How can I help?
And she's only 19.
Only 19. What do you need? How can I help? My answer was, men's uniform, please. And she said, okay, let me check. And she did. And she came back to me the next day saying that they couldn't find any way to give me the men's uniform, but they thought about more creative solution. In the IDF, we also have work uniform, which are unisex, the same for females and males, and they gave me a permission to wear only work uniform.
Which is a nice solution, creative solution.
Very creative solution.
Yeah, that's nice. So you begin your service in a proper way?
Yes, I began my service with my commanders knowing about me. My peers didn't, but I started my service like almost any other soldier, and moved to my training, my professional training, and everything was fine. It was amazing, actually.
Okay. And how the army helped you really to achieve your goal as a transgender soldier? In the first year of my service, again, it was a secret, only my commanders knew, but after 1 year I've been chosen to go to officer school, and ever since I started the course, we in the IDF in officer school put a lot of effort to talk about what does it mean to be an officer, what does it mean to be an officer in the IDF, and which kind of commander are you going to be. And for me, it was clear from the first moment, I want to be the kind of commander that his soldiers feel comfortable talking to him and can be open and honest with him. But in the same time, I realized I first need to do the same. To be the same with them, yeah.
Exactly. So, but understanding aside, it took me almost 3 months to get to a point where I had the courage to stand in front of my company of 60 cadets. In the end, the last week of Bahad Echad, which is the officer school in Israel, I stood in front of my friends, my peers, and told them my story. But actually, I don't remember anything from this talk. Like, I have a complete blackout. Yeah, I was so stressed. But I remember how I opened the conversation and how I ended that. I opened by saying that I want to share something about myself with them, but not because I want them to better know me. This is only a bonus. I want them to be able to use my story as a tool, as future commanders. If they ever run into a soldier with a similar story, they will now have a tool to help them achieve their goals. And then the blackout.
Yeah, the blackout.
And then I only remember how I finished the conversation by saying that from this moment, it's no longer a secret. And actually, this was the point where I started my services as a male, and like I graduated the same course. I started as a female candidate. I now graduated as a male officer.
So you came out to the closest twice.
Yes.
That's it. We received already 2 questions, but we're going to wait a little bit before we ask them because I have other questions to complete the story. So you finished your officer course, and then you went out to the big army. And you need to command those new soldiers that you receive, and you need to be an example for them. How you decide to be ever in front of them and to be obviously honest with them on who you are because you want them to be honest with you. So what was your strategy as a commander to lead them?
So I came back to my formal unit. I was sent to the behavior analysis unit in the ground forces, and I had 70 soldiers under my command. And from the first moment, I decided that it's not going to be a secret. It's going to be something that I address as a common fact. If someone would ask me a question, I will answer. Of course, I'm their commander, so not every question is okay because we have what we call distance. Exactly. But I decided it's not going to be a secret, and actually I hoped that this kind of honesty coming from me would help them being honest with me, and it worked all the way. I felt that it was never an issue between me and my soldiers and me and my commanders.
Yeah. So another personal question, during your process in the army, what the most surprised you, and what was your biggest challenge that you found to battle for?
So the biggest surprise for me was to discover that I had many commanders over the years. Some were old, some were young, some came from an academic background, some from operational background, some were religious, some secular, but everybody, and I mean everybody that heard my story as for me, were completely fine with it. I was terrified of the moment where I will tell one of my commanders my story, and he will think, less of me because of it. And I never stood in front of someone who treated me differently because of my gender identity. And every time it was a surprise, but also something that made me feel that...
Made me stronger also.
Yes.
And how do you explain that?
I think, actually, as an officer, until officer course, I was very surprised by those reactions. But during officer course, I realized that as officers, as future commanders, we are being taught that in the IDF, because it's a mandatory army, because everybody joins in, you meet all sorts of different people, and you as a commander, your first mission is to lead your soldiers. And no matter who they are, where they are coming from, what are their background, you should treat everybody equally. So I think this is the explanation I see for the treatment I got. Commanders in the IDF know that it doesn't matter how different their soldiers are from them, they are going to treat everybody the same way. And I had also luck to have those kind of commanders that actually practice these values.
So that was a surprise. So what was your biggest challenge?
So my biggest challenge was, let's call it the bureaucracy. Again, we didn't have any policy back then. So even though my commanders wanted to help me, they didn't have any tools to do that. They didn't have any regulations or instructions or anyone to tell them what to do in this situation. And we needed to find all those, as we said, creative solutions for my needs, or and not once I needed to compromise stuff that I cared really much about, and faced me with a situation where I needed to put aside my own personal needs and just to do whatever the big system, let's call it, need.
We're going to just stop a minute just to welcome the new people that joined the webinar in live. My name is Sacha Dratwa from the World Jewish Congress. We have Ofer Erez, the first openly transgender of the IDF, officer transgender of the IDF. And if you have any question to ask Ofer, don't hesitate to write in the comments, ask any question. I will ask the question and Ofer will answer for you. So don't hesitate in the comments below. Thank you. So just to continue. So that was your story a little bit, and I'm sure that there is many other details that we can hear about. But I would like to ask you what was different in the IDF, in the Israeli army, compared to other armies in the world, which in the past few years we see a lot of change in many, many countries in the world. But what I understand, the IDF was one of the first army to accept the LGBTQ community and the Q community soldiers, to serve and to adapt the army to this new natural form of soldier that exists.
So the IDF officially, since the beginning of the 90s, accept gay, lesbian, and bisexual soldiers. They, again, in the beginning of the 90s, the Chief General addressed the issue and said this is a non-issue for us because the IDF is a mandatory military. Everybody must serve. We don't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. This is how you say it in English, right?
Yes.
The trans question was a bit different, and again, when I joined in 2012 to the IDF, it wasn't a question people asked themselves. But I think the mentality of the IDF, because it's a mandatory service, put us as a military ever since 48 in front of a question about how do we accept and how do we create an inclusive place where everybody can serve together. So it's a big question that every soldier and every commander must ask himself when he joined the IDF. How do I service people who are different from me? And it doesn't matter, again, which kind of different it is.
Yeah. Okay, but what was unique compared to other countries?
What was unique? I think, again, the will. I felt like the IDF wanted to solve this problem, wanted to find a way to adapt. And I feel I had the amazing opportunity to talk to officers from all over the world and to work with other militaries. And I felt like in the IDF, I met officers from the lowest to the highest ranks that you felt like they want to make it happen. They want to make it possible, and I think we believe that serving in the IDF is a big part of being an Israeli, and we want to give an equal opportunity for everybody. And if equal means join the IDF, so we need to do that also.
Okay. And so it looks like the IDF was one of the first armies in the world really to adapt itself with new policies for the LGBTQ community. Other armies have learned from the IDF? Have copied what was done into the IDF?
So I had the opportunity to talk to several countries and officers from these countries, specifically the US and the Canadian military. And yes, they looked on the IDF as an example about how to adopt and what are the specific needs for the trans community in order to serve equally. Actually, when I started this work, let's call it, I didn't join the IDF in order to make any sort of difference in this field, let's call it. I hope to have a normal service, but during my service, I think after I came out in officer course, I started getting, actually I got the first call from a young man before the military saying, I heard about your story and I wanted to ask you how can I also join the IDF and have a successful service. And of course I talked to him and I shared with him my experience, but after him came another one and another one and another one, and I realized there is something bigger going on than just me and a few other soldiers, and the military as an organization need to address the issue. And so I turned to the gender affair units of the IDF, offer them to start working together to better understand the needs of the trans community, and of course working with civil organization in Israel, and starting to form this policy that I had the privilege to write and to address issues from uniform and appearance to medical issues to dorms and bathrooms and every sort of question there is. But I think the most unique idea behind this policy is the fact that we call it tailor-made policy. The IDF understood that the trans community and people in it are in different places in their life. They have different needs. If I am, for example, out of the closet and my family is very accepting and very supportive, I would have a bit of a different needs than someone who came from the ultra-Orthodox community, where it's very, very...
It's a close, it's a subject that will be not talk at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you are trans in a very conservative community, it will be much harder, and maybe you can't come home with the right kind of uniform. If you've been seeing at home as a male, but you're actually a woman, you can't go back home to your conservative community with a female clothing.
That will not work.
So we realized that we need to have this tailor-made policy, meaning that we give every soldier whatever they need and not whatever we think they need.
I would like just to do a parenthesis, but I think the subject that you speak about is also a broader subject into the IDF, not about gender, but also about minorities serving in the IDF. And we have seen Muslims community serving in the IDF, Christian soldier and everything. And the IDF is really adapting itself for every type of minorities. And we have today battalions of Muslim battalions, Bedouin battalions. There are really people serving in the IDF. And the IDF is really adapting itself for each one and every one. And that's something that's a bit unique in the IDF, if I'm not wrong.
It is, and again, all of it comes from this understanding that if we recruit everyone, we must give them equal opportunity. I can say it's a question that not only the IDF deals with, but all the Israeli society. Israel is a very diverse country, and I, in my current position as the executive director of Jerusalem Open House, Jerusalem, I think, is the best example for a diverse city, where you can see all those different communities and all those different way of life that you need to, I wouldn't say adapt, but you need to find a way to live together. And
you think that today the Israeli society live together?
I think this is still one of the largest challenges that we have. I can share with you that specifically in Jerusalem, it's something we deal with every day. This is why one of the reasons why the Jerusalem Open House is not just the Jerusalem Open House for pride, but also for tolerance, because we all live together, and in order to make it work, we need to learn how to
accept everyone.
Exactly. To accept one another.
That's important.
Even if we're different, we don't need to be the same, but we need to know how to accept that people are different from us.
That's critical. That's important. So Israel is a bit like, in the Middle East, weird country. We are the only democracy in the Middle East. We accept each one and everyone. We have a religious community. We have a secular community. We have a bit of everything. And what makes not just the IDF a unique society, a unique army, but what makes the Israeli society, in your point of view, as the director of the Open House in Jerusalem, something unique, especially in the Middle East, with a lot of tension, a lot of minorities living together, and a lot of religious affairs that are mixing into the society, and still Israel succeed to be the advanced country in all the Middle East for sure. I don't know in terms of the world, but we're one of the best countries dealing with LGBTQ affairs in the world as well. So what makes us so unique?
It's a good question. I think we as a country, regarding LGBTQ issues in general, we still have a long way to go. And also you can see a big difference between how you have a gap between legal protection and laws in Israel regarding the community and the general atmosphere. which is also very different between places in Israel. Like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, for example, are two different worlds. But I think that the diversity we must face every single day is benefiting us as a society. This is why, for example, in the Jerusalem Open House, ever since the first day of the organization, we serve all the people of Jerusalem. Jews, Muslims, Christians, secular, Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, everybody are welcome.
That's unique in the world.
It's amazing.
You don't have any other place like that in the world, I can assume.
It's amazing. You can see, scenes that being taken out of a movie. You can enter the Jerusalem Open House. We have a hub, like a living room, where people can just come and hang and be themselves in a space and in a safe space where they can just be. And you can enter the living room and see on the couch. You can see two boys speaking in Arabic, another girl sitting doing her homework in Russian, and two ladies are talking in Hebrew. Everybody sit together in the same space, and knowing that they have more in common than
the conflict itself, like than what's happening in the ground. That's beautiful.
We are trying, yeah.
Perhaps peace will come from there. I interrupt you in the middle of the question about the uniqueness of the country, but I think that's basically the open house is the answer of the question. What is unique is bringing people together from different backgrounds and living together. But it leads me to another question. So Israel is accused a lot of time to pink watch the world and using the LGBT community to brand the country better. And we have seen, I think this year it was like 250,000 people in the street of Tel Aviv for the Gay Pride, which was amazing. I was there, it was beautiful to see it, and so many people from all over the world coming. And we are an open society, and if you come to Tel Aviv today, it's one of the most thriving cities in the world with the best LGBT community living together, and not just for the LGBT community, but for every type of community. What do you answer to people that speak about the pink watch of Israel?
I think LGBT life in Israel is a real question. It's not a question of publicity. Those are real people. We are real people living real life, dealing with real challenges, and also having good and bad experience like everybody else. I think that when we address the LGBTQ issue in Israel, we shouldn't address it as something being used as rather than something we actually need to talk about. We need to address this issue. We need to learn from other countries how to do it better, and also we need to, help and teach other countries and communities what we can teach them. So I prefer, I feel that talking about LGBTQ only as something we use as PR is to look at the situation as not real. And it is. We need to look on the deeper level of what does it mean to be LGBTQ. And also I think the LGBTQ community and the challenges that our community face is very similar all over the world. We should be able to talk about these challenges with other communities without addressing the discussion always to the conflict. We have real issues to deal with, and we need to be able to work together in order to solve them.
So basically, we can invite to the open house in Jerusalem every person that speaks about Pink Watch to see what really is happening on the ground also, or to join the Gay Pride in Tel Aviv to see that, yes, the issues are addressed in Israel. We have more to do, but that's like every society today. I think that there is not the perfect society, but they need to see what's happening really in Israel, because in the type of oasis in the Middle East, we're a bit unique as a society.
I think there is a frustration inside the community, because as you said, the Israeli society on the ground, like you have the Tel Aviv Pride and you have LGBT life in Israel, which are of course more open than in other countries, but the frustration comes from the gap between how life happening on everyday basis and how the government and the law system address the community. So again, those are real issues needed to be addressed as a challenge and not only as a PR slogan.
Okay. As I promised, we have two questions from the audience. So the first one is, how do you see the future for the transgender soldier in the IDF?
First of all, it's a very nice question, because when I look at the IDF right now, I already see the future. Like, I remember my own experience, and looking at the IDF right now, we have dozens of soldiers serving in any kind of unit there is, like intelligence, combat, training, everything is open for them, and for me this is the future. I hope to see more education for commanders, because regulations are not enough. You need to have educations and tools for the commanders to be able to lead those soldiers and to command them in a proper and just the right way. But I believe that, first of all, we are already in the future, and I hope to see it continues, and to see that every trans teenage in Israel knows that he wouldn't be discriminated on the basis of his gender identity when he or she goes on to the next step. If it's the IDF or national service or anything they will choose, they will be treated as equal.
Okay, the other question that we have from the audience. So if you have any question, don't hesitate to write on the comments. What would you want other transgender soldiers in the IDF and other militaries to know?
I want them to know that their gender identity shouldn't prevent them from being themselves and making the choices that they want to do and to achieve their goals. I think that in our world today, not only in militaries, but all around the world, and I see it every day in the Jerusalem Open House, transgender people are afraid of going to work, going on the street, going to school because of what they might face. I wish to see that reality change, and I wish to ask the trans community not to be afraid and to fight. And to fight because it's not simple, and it's not easy, and it's not always nice, but what I think gave me a lot of encouragement during the years is that I realized that everything I do and every step I take can make other people way much easier next time. So if that logic help someone to fight, I would suggest them see themselves as pioneers and ask them to move forward and pave the way for others.
Beautiful message. Thank you. So just to conclude a little bit what we have said here, I think that, in my point of view, what I've learned, that the open house in Jerusalem is a place to visit, first of all. And as a director, I hope that you will invite me one day to see it.
Of course.
And every viewer that is interested, I think that just to hear that we have Muslims, Christians, Orthodox community sitting together around the same table is something unique. So wonderful work, and I hope that you will continue to lead not the change that you have done into the idea, but also from the open house in Jerusalem to other places in the world. That's great. But as a Zionist person, you grow in a Zionist environment, Zionist house, and then you serve in the army as an officer, which was also a Zionist sign, and willing to make this place also a better place, and that you believe in your country. What really, 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 at the end of the day, and we speak about it, surprise you in all the process, but not just about the people, as how your story and the Zionist story was connected?
I think that, and it goes back to reading what Herzl said about Zionism. Zionism is not just about the Jewish people having their own country, is that which kind of country is it going to be? And I think this idea of which kind of country is it going to be is something that I took from my parents, and I took it to the military, and I took it to the Jerusalem Open House, where I feel that we should be responsible to shape the Israeli society, and not only to have Israel as a concept, but to create a society that we can be proud of.
Yeah, proud of. Yeah, the Israeli society still continue to grow, to change, and we begin with the kibbutz and the small villages, and now we are the startup nation, and the society and the country is changing all the time. So it's beautiful to see that it's continue to change. It will continue to change in different direction, and that's also what's beautiful in Israel, that we begin from something small with nothing basically, and now we have everything, and all the eyes of the world looking at Israel. So it's also beautiful to see that. I would like to thank you for being with us today. It was wonderful to hear you, to listen to your story, to hear different aspects of your challenge and how you adapt the army to yourself, and not the army adapt itself, and that's beautiful. What is the message that you have to the world?
The message that I have to the world, I hope people would understand that the LGBTQ community is another community, and a very unique community, and I think as a Jewish people living all over the world, having our own values from one point, but the other, like, we are living everywhere, we are part of the society everywhere, but we still have our own unique identity. I think the LGBT community is pretty much similar. Like, we have our own identity. It might be a bit different, and yet we are a part of every community and every society, if this society recognize it or not. Yeah, you have LGBT people everywhere, and I hope people would understand that and encourage people to be themselves and to be proud of themselves. And I think a society where people are feeling confident to be themselves, and a diverse society is a better society. And I hope we can all work together in order to encourage people to be themselves.
Wonderful. So just to finish the webinar of today, really thank you to Ofer for being with us today from Israel, to be in New York and at the headquarters of the World Jewish Congress, and to listen to your story. We're going to have interesting webinars coming next month, so stay tuned on the WJC Facebook page. We're going to have Jeremy Schwab speaking about anti-Semitism in sport from ESPN. So really, we're going to announce it in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So really stay tuned to World Jewish Congress Facebook page, webinar series. So thank you, Ofer, for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
I hope to see you again soon.
Me too.
Thank you very much.
Come to the Jerusalem Open House.
Of course, that definitely will do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.